Don, great pleasure to welcome really one of the legends in sportscasting. I know you know him a bit, Don, and I had a chance to talk to him once before, because growing up in New York, watching him with the Knicks and Rangers. The name of the book is Bob Wolff's Complete Guide to Sportscasting, and he joined us by telephone today. Bob, thanks for being with us. How are you today?
Great. It's a delight to be with you, fellas.
Had a chance to talk to you back in 1988, Bob, on another network down here, so I'm glad we got a chance to do it again.
I'm glad we're both surviving this long.
That's right. Don, I know you know Bob pretty well.
Well, I just got to say, Bob, the last time you and I got together, you're not going to remember this, but I do. I dropped you off at the University of Pennsylvania. We were doing a game at the Spectrum, and you needed to ride up. I can't remember whether it was your son or your daughter was going to the University of Pennsylvania. And it was about 11 o'clock at night, and you needed to ride back to the university. And I had the pleasure of taking you back, and I think that's the last time you and I got together.
What judgment I had to select you to do that. You were very nice to do it.
Don likes to drive fast. I'm glad you made it okay.
I'm still surviving. It was a good ride.
Well, Bob, just for the folks down here, I know in the Tampa Bay area, you also did some work not only in New York, but you did the Rowdies games for several seasons down here. So I know the folks down here are going to be interested in reading your book as well. I guess there isn't a sport you haven't done play-by-play for, right, Bob?
Well, here's how it went, guys. During the years, somebody would say to me, by the way, you ever done the dog show? Dog show? Of course. How about horse show? Absolutely. How about soccer? Yes. I always kept saying, yes, I can do it. And then I rushed out and bought books on them, went to practices, spoke to the coaches, watched tapes, and learned how to do them. And after about 4 or 5 years, I became the authority. In my mind, that was.
Don, did you ever do the dog show? I never did that one.
The kennel show was one that I never did. But I did the same thing Bob did when they asked me about doing the Philadelphia Choir games down at the Spectrum. And Prison was doing it at that time, and they called me on the phone and they said, how about doing the Philadelphia Choir games at the Spectrum? I said, oh, I'll be glad to. I've done a lot of those. Other than the 10 relays, I've never been inside for an inside track meet in my life.
Well, I'll tell you, doing the track meets is tough, particularly if you're doing a sprint, because in a matter of less than 10 seconds, you got to figure out who's at first, who's in second, and they're also closely bunched. But with the dog show, I added something else. When I was in college, I used to sing with the dance band. So in the dog show, I sang dog show songs for 33 years. I was like the quick parts of the dog show. Dogs loved it, by the way. The humans couldn't take it.
Yeah, I was surprised, Bob, reading the book. I didn't know that you also did some singing and you did some dance band shows. I mean, Don and I do a show down here occasionally, a big band radio show, so I didn't know you had that interest as well.
Well, I always have the interest. You know, I figure that we're all in a branch of show business. Sportscasting is really, to me, show business. We're doing sports. The weather guys are in show business doing weather. The news guy, for example, if a station wanted to hire the most up-to-date and erudite guy to do the news, wouldn't they look first at college professors who are so good at what they do and so learned? No, they hire performers to read the news, and that's what the business is. We're all people who enhance what we do. If it's a talk show, we'll make it more exciting for the people who love sports. If you're a play-by-play guy, by getting excited and emotional, you enhance the broadcast, you identify, you inform, etc. So I always felt that we're part journalist and part entertainer.
I could not agree with you more. And the dog show, as I remember in my early days now, I'm about the same age you are. Bud Palmer used to do all that from Madison Square Garden. Years ago, when they first put it on television, I can't remember whether it was on WPIX or whether it was on some other channel, but I remember Bud Palmer, he was the first one I remember doing the dog show.
And I followed him.
Is that right?
That's right. He went on to do a CBS show, so I took over the play-by-play of all the events. They did the Knicks, the Rangers, college basketball, all the rest, and I kept doing college basketball. I did the Knicks for about 29 years, the NIT for 27, and on I kept doing all those shows year after year. The PIX eventually lost it to Channel 9, and then I started doing it for NBC.
I did the 76ers for 13 years, and during the great years when Doc was there and Bobby Jones and Mo Cheeks and Andrew Tony and so forth. And so we would cross paths every now and then when you were doing the games at Madison Square Garden, and I was as well. And I'll tell you, the only thing I can't imagine, architects, they spend them millions and millions of dollars, and they put our radio and TV booths up in the so high up in the sky you couldn't see the floor at Madison Square Garden.
That's true. It's almost like a punishment. You want to do things, we'll get up there. I did a couple of games up there, and I couldn't really identify one player from the next because I was so far away. Guys were like my bosom buddies. Oh, that was torturous for a while.
I explained that exactly. When I talked to Doug, we got together. I said, here's the entertainment capital of the world. The only other place I can remember, I was doing Temple games at the time, and we went out to Duquesne, and the great architects out there, they built a brand new facility in Duquesne in Pittsburgh. The only thing they forgot any location for radio and television. They had no place. That's so the hall
in that garden, which is the present garden. When they started out, they didn't have a press box built. They had a strange idea that if they just took seats, just like spectator seats, and gave those to the press at certain games, then the rest of the time, when the press weren't covering, like ice shows and the circus and whatnot, they could use these seats to sell. But in doing that, they left no room for what you do if you're in those seats and you had to move from one spot to the other because they put planks in front of you to put the typewriters on. And everyone could get up to let them by to get to the men's room or file a story. And they had no place for the cameras, and it became really a mess in the beginning. So I went around the garden looking for spots, and they finally decided that you could put the booth over the exit ways.
Right.
But that was a problem because the cameras that interfere with the spectators, so they had to lower the exit ways, but then they had to get a building permit in order to do that because there wasn't much room to get under them. But they finally worked it out, but the people who build arenas rarely consult the press as to what you need first. They say everybody can see. Unfortunately for ice hockey in the beginning, the people in the lower row seats would stand up on shots near the goal and near the boards, and you couldn't see over their heads as to what was happening. It took a lot of doing. But that was the way of all sports. For example, when they built that Astrodome in the beginning, they forgot that if they covered the roof so you could see the ball, that the grass wouldn't grow. So they put on that's how they brought in AstroTurf to make it look like a ballpark again. But the people who do the construction rarely consult those who do the broadcasting.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Bob, just again, I grew up in New York and had a chance to listen and watch you doing those great Knick teams of the early 70s there, the 2 championship years, you and Cal Ramsey on the TV, and you talk in the book about some of the great games. I remember the one against the Bucks where the Knicks, I think, scored something like 19 points in the last 5 minutes to come back. One of the great games.
Correct. And they held Kareem Abdul-Jabbar without a point in those 5 minutes and 50 seconds. That was a fantastic comeback, as was the Knicks' comeback when they won their 18th straight in their first championship year, because that was at the time a record in the NBA.
Of course, again, Don and I have talked a lot about the classic game you did with back in '56, the Don Larson no-hitter, and then, of course, the Giants and the Colts back in that '58.
Right.
2 real classic broadcasts you were a part of.
Yeah, I happened to be at the right place at the right time. There's an awful lot of luck in the business, as you guys know. One, it has to be on your station or your network or your sponsor. In those early days, a lot depended on the sponsor because one sponsor could afford the whole business. Nowadays, for example, on the Super Bowl or anything like that, they have multiple sponsors, so no one sponsor has power anymore. And that means if you're in the right network, like Joe Buck and Tim McCarver, you get to do the games. But if they lose the rights to that network, they're out of the picture and somebody else does it. So it's changed a lot that day. But in those days, Gillette was the king. They did all the big games, and I happened to be the Gillette choice to do the ball games. So I did their World Series, 56, the Larson game, 58, 61, and then I joined NBC TV, and I started doing all of the Game of the Week events.
Bob, I'd be interested in your impression. I spent a lot of time the last week and a half or 2 watching the NBA playoffs. I watched most all the games, and I'd be interested in your observation and how you look at the game today as opposed to when we broadcast the game a few years ago.
Well, in the early days, I was fortunate. I was the first TV announcer in Washington and did the team called the Washington Capitals, who were a great early team. It was then called the Basketball Association of America. Red Auerbach happened to be the coach then. But believe it or not, in the first year, they became later the NBA. In the first year of basketball, pro basketball, no team shot as much as 30% as a team. And only one player in the whole league, Bob Ferrick, was able to shoot over 40%, and he just barely. The rest of them were all shooting the 200 percentages. And at that time, there was no time clock. They had to work the ball to the open man to make sure he had an easy shot. Well, every year after that, the rates kept going up percentage-wise. So you got all the teams out and they'll not only shoot around the 50% mark or close to it, but the three-pointers can do that as well. So they've gotten an awful lot better at the game. But one thing that is for sure, the Knicks in those championship years, 69, 70, 72, 73, came together with a group that was completely unselfish. And those guys got more applause at Madison Square Garden when I did the games than making the basket. Hitting the open man was the cry, and defense was the chant from the spectators. As a consequence, neither of those championship teams, with great ball handlers, Walt Frazier, Willis Reed, Bill Bradley, Dick Barnett, on and on. They were all sensational guys. Dave DeBussch, who provided the final link in the puzzle. None of them were in the top 10 in scoring, but they were way up there in assists. So it didn't matter who scored, because the guy got the assist, got the applause. And that doesn't happen today.
Well, Red was the ringleader of that. That was pretty much his philosophy from day one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Red Holtzman, those great teams back then. And then when Earl Monroe came in 73, that kind of gave them that impetus to win the second title. Of course, back in 70, Bob, you remember that great game when Willis Reed comes out on the floor after they didn't think he would play and really inspired them in that first one, didn't he?
That's right. That was the most emotional game during those years. But they've been searching ever since after that 72-73 win. They haven't won since then.
It's been tough to be a Knicks fan.
Yeah, I promised them that when I left there to join News 12 Long Island, where I work now, I promised them that if the time came and they're going to win a championship, give me a call. I'll come back and work with them again.
Well, Bob, let's talk about...
It's sad to see Donnie Walsh go yesterday, or the day before yesterday. I don't know the Dolans. I can't even recollect good things or bad things. I just don't know enough about them. But I thought he had done a terrific job in 2.5, 3 years of reorchestrating that franchise. And to see him go, I just don't understand it.
We never sit in, you or I or anybody else, on what actually takes place in conversations between the people. So there's no question, if you're going to be the general manager and in charge of the whole thing, you want to make sure that it's your decision and not management's decision. And that's true in all cases with all club owners. So I don't know what the inside story was, but apparently it was a question of who have the power, and the management always wins in those cases. Just they provide the money.
Bob, let's talk about the book a little bit. It just came out. I had a chance to read through it, and I'm glad you wrote a book like this. There have been other people that have sort of written sportscasting books, but it was more stories. I think you really get into the nuts and bolts of how to do it, in addition to some great stories, but you give some tips on how to really do the job.
Well, the thing is, first of all, in the early days of radio, and I started out there before I switched over to TV mainly, in the early days of radio, the voice was all important. And the Mel Allens of those days and the Rod Barbers and all the rest were known for their description ability, that they used all the right words and they provided the excitement, but they did not go into strategy, opinions, backgrounds, and so forth. They just called the game, and the public, the listeners, provided their own imagination as to what was happening on the field. And they were great broadcasters. But then they decided that they could get more spice into the broadcast by bringing in former ball players and former coaches and managers and the rest to tell them what actually did happen in the huddle, dugout, the locker rooms, etc. And they came in and did their job. They were not known for using words well, but they were known for having inside information. So we brought in the color analyst, and that changed the way that the games are being done. In the early days, I did all the games myself and provided my own color, which I thought was just as important as the play-by-play. And then came the third phase that we're in now, and then as I said, all these guys have a certain sound-alike way, so let's get in somebody with weird voices, unusual opinions, strong judgments, who are a little eccentric, whatever way it is, because they attract viewers or listeners, and that's how we care about attracting people, because people attract sponsors, and that's the business we're in, making money on selling our rights. So we're now on a stage where we are part journalist and part entertainer. It's become an entertainment medium, and that's just the way that it is. So I've always tried to live with what's happening in the present, and I've worked as hard as being entertaining as I have been doing my descriptive ability. So that's the change that's been made. And TV has changed that considerably, because in TV, you don't have to describe anything. On a home run, I used to say, there's a long fly ball to left field, the left fielder's back near the wall, he can't get it, in there for home. I grew up like that. Now on TV, you can say, wow, what a shot. And then the TV cameras show where it lives. So you're just putting a caption on it. You don't need to use any word description. So you're really an electronic journalist today.
Well, really is a great book to read, and you have a nice little section in the back, Bob. I enjoyed you do a transcript, I think, of Howie Rose and his color man on a Met game. He really amplifies what you just said right there. And sometimes you have a bad game you got to do, and you still have to be entertaining, and you get a great example of that in the book.
Well, if you were able to come prepared with enough background material, like you were asking me excellent questions because you are prepared for an interview, and if you go into a broadcast knowing that the odds are your team is going to lose, you're doing play-by-play, you can keep the thing entertaining, and the stories you tell, the reminiscences, the stuff you've dug up in the dugouts. You're helping the ball club so much, because otherwise people tune out. If they tune out, the ratings are low. If the ratings are low, the sponsors don't want you anymore. So basically, that's our job, is to enhance. Really, it enhances sports, and that plays a vital role in selling tickets.
Don, we got about a minute left. Don, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just want to say, to me, there's still the all-time great, and I go all the broadcasters you just mentioned, but I think Vince Scully's in the class by himself.
Well, Finn is one of the old-fashioned voice guys. He speaks in a poetic manner. He has a beautiful voice, and Vin doesn't give it way to the newcomers. Vin is one of the few allowed to work without a sideman, without a color man, and he's able to do that because he's got the privilege. He does it so well. So there's room for everybody.
Well, Bob, as a person who grew up in Long Island, I'm glad you're still doing the Long Island News 12. A buddy of mine I went to college with has done some work with you, Gary Napoli. So if you see him, please say hello for me. And
I certainly will.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you again. We won't wait another 23 years, though, before they do the next one. How about that?
Anytime you feel like gabbing about anything, take up the phone, call me. I'm very accessible, and it's a delight to be with you.
We'll have you on again.
Always a pleasure, Bobby. And I'm on the boardwalk here in Seagirt, New Jersey, looking out over the Atlantic Ocean while we're doing this show. It couldn't be a better half an hour.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, guys. It's a delight to be with you, and I'm flattered you called me.
Thank you, Bob. Bob Wolff's Complete Guide to Sportscasting, published by Skyhorse Publishing. Don, good to talk to you, and we'll take a break right now and be right back.